Oh, you coming back? Are you gonna be quiet? Get your swords. Let's go. Shh. David said, bring me back my wife. I bought her with 100 Philistine foreskins. Okay? He's doing his thing. He's like dancing before the Lord, leaping and jumping. No, go sit down. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here for part 7 of the Women in the Bible series. And I'm gonna waste no time and jump right in. We're talking about David and all his women's for the most part. But we're gonna start out actually talking about Eli. We talked about Eli in part 6. Eli was the priest that Hannah left Samuel with. He was given back to the Lord and raised in Shiloh in the tabernacle with Eli. So Eli now, we know about him. He's the priest. He was the judge over Israel for 40 years. And he had 2 sons who worked in the priesthood with him. And their names were Hophni and Phineas. And they were in a battle. So of course things are going on. And there was a battle. Hophni and Phineas end up dying in battle. And the other thing that happened is that the Ark of God was captured by the enemy. Now the Ark of God is a special item or structure that was very, very, very special to the people of Israel. So it had gotten captured. Now word got back to Eli that the Ark of God was captured, also that his sons died. But when he heard about the Ark, Eli fell back in his chair and died. He was 98 years old, he was blind, and he was also overweight. So the fall killed him, unfortunately. And then Phineas's wife, she was pregnant and close to delivery. And when she heard the news about the ark being captured and her husband dying and her father-in-law Eli dying, she immediately went into labor and had her baby, and she passed away in childbirth. But before she passed, she named her son Ichabod, which means where is the glory. It was in reference to the glory being lost because of the Ark of God being captured. She took it out on her son and named him Ichabod. That's just the little snippet that we know about Eli, and I just wanted to mention that because Phineas's wife was mentioned there. So now we're going to jump into talking about David. Now Samuel's role, his responsibility was to anoint the next king. The Lord gave him this job. He went and found Jesse, who I talked about in part 6. Jesse was the father of David, but Jesse had other sons as well. And so the Lord sent Samuel to find the next king, and he ended up finding David. Now David was the youngest of all his siblings, all his brothers, and he was the shortest, the smallest, but he was also said to be very handsome. He was a beautiful man, dark, and had beautiful eyes. So Samuel went and found him. He was going to anoint him as king. And obviously David was very special in the Lord's eyes. And the Bible mentions that David is a man after God's own heart. Now, at this point, David is also a skilled harpist. He plays the harp. And Saul, who was king of Israel at the time, he had a tormenting spirit that would come upon him. And he wanted a musician to play for him so that he could be soothed. And somebody knew about David, sent David over. David was able to soothe the spirit. So when David would play the harp, the tormenting spirit that God sent on him would leave, and he would be at peace, he would be calmed. So Saul did at the time really like David. He made David his armor bearer. He also eventually made David commander of the men at war. And when they did go to war and fight some battles, they came back and the people in the land were celebrating and saying, Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his 10,000s. So that right there was giving all that credit to David, saying he did so much greater than Saul. Saul began to be jealous of David and he wanted to take him out. Kill him. Now I'm trying to spell some of the words like I think I said before because of YouTube guidelines. I don't want certain words to be said too many times in this video get flagged or anything. But yeah, he wanted to take him out and he tried to set him up. So he wanted to put him in battle, and he said, if you win this battle, I'll give you my daughter Merab as a wife. Saul didn't even have intentions on giving his daughter, really. He wanted David to die in battle, and then he wasn't going to give the daughter anyway. But David didn't accept his offer, and then Saul gave Merab to another man. Meanwhile, though, while all this is happening, Saul's other daughter, Michal, fell in love with David. And Saul knew this, so he wanted to use this to his advantage. He approached David with another offer, and he said, if you fight in a battle against the Philistines, I will give you my daughter Michal. David said, I'm poor. I come from a poor family. I don't have enough money to pay the bride price for a king's daughter. So Saul was like, no, don't worry about it. Just bring me back 100 foreskins of the Philistines. Bring me back
100 Philistine foreskins,
and you can have Michal. But Saul actually thought that David was going to end up being Killed in this battle to get that. But he ended up overtaking the Philistines, and he got 200 foreskins. So he doubled it. He ended up getting Michal. Saul did come through on the offer, but Saul still wanted to take David out. Now, time is going on. Different things are happening. There's a moment even when David is still playing the harp for Saul. Saul threw a spear at David. He was able to dodge it, and he didn't get him. But all along, he still wanted to take him out. And there were times when he would pretend that everything was fine. He would tell his son Jonathan, who was David's best friend, oh, we're good, we're good. And Jonathan did not really believe that his father wanted to harm David, but David let him know, like, your dad is crazy. He wants me dead, and he's not going to stop until something happens to me. So eventually, later on, Jonathan is finally convinced that that's the case, but it took a while. But either way, so Saul still wants to get David. So one night, he sets up his men. He sends his troops over to get David. He said, when he comes out in the morning, get him. Michal decides to help David. Now the troops want to get him in the morning. So during the night, Michal helped David to escape out the window. So he gets out the window and he runs off somewhere. And then the troops come in, apparently, I guess the next morning. Michal had put an idol in the bed and put some goat's hair over it to make it look like David was in the bed. She told the men, he's sick, he can't get up, and, you know, he's not well. So the troops went back to Saul and said, David is sick, he's unwell, he can't get up. Saul said, bring David's bed with him in it to me. This is happening now. He wasn't accepting that this man is sick. Bring his whole bed here with him in it. They brought the bed, saw that it was just an idol, and then they realized that David was gone. And then Saul questioned Michal, like, why would you allow my enemy to escape? Why did you assist him? Why did you help him? Why did he escape? And you know this is my enemy. And Michal says she had to help David because he threatened to kill her. Either way, he was on his way off somewhere. And so Saul eventually gave Michal to another man to be a wife. And he gave Michal to a man named Palti. So that's how Saul handled that situation. And now David is... And now... Go outside! Go outside! You're messing up my video. Go outside. Go! Shh! Go! Oh, you coming back? Are you gonna be quiet? No, go sit down. Go sit down and stay quiet. I'm busy now. Okay, David now is traveling around. Different things are going on. He's traveling now in the wilderness of Paran. And apparently there's a wealthy man named Nabal. And he has 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. And he's very well off. And his animals live in Carmel. And David, apparently with his men, have some kind of control over this area. They're kind of looking out for Nabal's flock, and everything is going well. So it looks like they have a pretty decent relationship. Nabal has a wife named Abigail, and Abigail is noted to be a sensible and beautiful woman. Nabal is noted to be crude and mean. And so at a time, David sends a message to Nabal through his messengers. And I want to read specifically what the message was because it's pretty lengthy and I want to just read it for context. This is the message that David sent through his men to Nabal. It says, "Peace and prosperity to you, your family, and everything you own. I am told that it is sheep shearing time. While your shepherds stayed among us near Carmel, we never harmed them, and nothing was ever stolen from them. Ask your own men, and they will tell you that this is true. So would you be kind to us, since we have come at a time of celebration? Please share any provisions you might have on hand with us and with your friend David. So David apparently thought this was just a simple request. We've done well for you. Can you do something for us? Share some of your provisions. Nabal's response to David's men is, who is this David? Who does he think he is? And then he says, there are a lot of servants who run away from their masters. Why should I share my bread, water, and meat that I've slaughtered with a band of outlaws from who knows where? That's his response. It was very snarky and snide. So the men take the message back to David. This is Nabal's response. The first thing David says when he heard that message was, get your swords. Let's go. Get up and on the horse. He tells his men, get your swords. We're riding out. We've taken Nabal out, because who is he to respond this way when we've been doing, just having a nice relationship? It wasn't like they were buddies or anything, but you've had your 3,000 sheep, 1,000 goats here. We're kind of watching over it, and this is how you repay us. So David wasn't having it. David and 400 of his men went on their way to go find Nabal, and 200 stayed back and watched the stuff. Then one of the messengers, Nabal's guys, went and told Abigail what took place. They're like, David sent a message to Nabal, a nice friendly greeting. Nabal responded with insults, pretty much offended David. He said that David and his men were good to them. Nothing was stolen, nothing was lost. And he confirmed that they were like a wall of protection for the sheep and us, like all of us. And he's now mad, and he tells Abigail that she needs to do something, otherwise it could be trouble for Nabal and his whole family. So Abigail gathers the following items. She gets 200 loaves of bread, 2 wine skins full of wine, 5 slaughtered sheep, about a bushel of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 fig cakes. She puts all these supplies on some donkeys and sends them off ahead of her, and she tells the servants that she sends this stuff with that she's going to be following behind. And all the while that Abigail was taking care of business, she didn't tell Nabal what she was doing. She got on her donkey, went on, and of course the stuff was ahead of her. When Abigail did finally approach David, she bowed very low to the ground. She accepted all the blame for the situation, and she begged to be heard. She told David that Nabal was a wicked and ill-tempered man, that Nabal was a fool, as his name means. His name actually meant fool. She told David that she never even saw the messengers that he sent. So she wasn't really part of it, but she was accepting the blame and apologizing as well. She says, let your enemies be cursed. She's like wishing blessings upon David now. She even told him, you've never done any wrong in your entire life. So she was laying it on thick. And then she's also trying to make David not carry out vengeance, because she's like, don't let this blemish your record. Don't let this mess with your conscience, this needless bloodshed and vengeance. You know, you want to have a clean slate when you take over Israel, when the Lord puts you in position. You don't want this to be on you. So she convinces him, and David is pleased with everything she's saying. He is looking on her favorably. I'll just say it like that. David thanked Abigail for her good sense, and he wished a blessing on her for helping him not commit murder. He said, because surely by morning, Nabal and all his men would have been gone if you hadn't come out. He said, you've helped me not to carry out vengeance with my own hands. And then he said, I will accept your gifts. He accepted her gifts, and he says, return home in peace. We will not kill your husband. He said, it's all good. We won't kill him. And then when Abigail did go home, Nabal was there having a party. He was drunk at the party, so Abigail didn't even want to talk to him about anything. The next morning, she did tell him what happened. She explained everything that happened and how she fixed everything up. And Nabal, his heart gave out, so he kind of had a stroke, and he ended up becoming paralyzed after he heard the news. And About 10 days later, the Lord struck him and he died. And when David heard that Nabal died, he said,
"Let me get Abby."
He sent his messengers to request that Abigail become his wife. And when the messengers came and talked to Abigail, they said, would you come back with us and be David's wife? She bowed low to the ground and she gladly accepted. She said that she would even be willing to be a slave and wash the feet of his servants. So she was ready to go either way. Abigail left fast to go be David's wife. She took 5 of her servant girls and went on. And then David also marries another woman from Jezreel named Ahinoam. And then he married other women and he had several children. And I'm just going to list them here somewhere. His oldest son was Amnon and Ahinoam was his mother. His second oldest was Daniel and Abigail was his mother. His third son was Absalom and his mother was Maacah. And Maacah also has a daughter named Tamar and she's going to come up a little bit later in this story as well. So they were full brother and sister as far as I can tell. His fourth son was Adonijah and his mother's name was Haggith. His fifth son was Shephatiah and his mother's name was Abital. And son number 6, his name was Ithream and his mother was Eglah. Alright, so that's just some brief information about his children and the women that he had, as many wives as he had. And now the next woman that comes up is named Rizpah. So Abner, he was the commander in Saul's army. But at this point, Saul is already passed on. He passed away earlier. But Abner is still on the scene. And Ishbosheth is one of Saul's sons. And now Ishbosheth accused Abner of sleeping with one of Saul's concubines named Rizpah. And Abner took offense to this. He got really upset. And then he decided to pledge allegiance to David instead. He's not rolling with Saul and people anymore because of the accusation. So he approaches David and tells him, let's make an allegiance, a solemn pact pretty much, and that he would help turn over all of Israel to David. And then David said, I'm not going to negotiate with you unless you help me get back my wife, Michal. David said, bring me back my wife. I bought her with 100 Philistine foreskins. Okay? I paid for that woman with foreskins and I want her back. So Abner was glad to do that. Abner and Ishbosheth apparently got involved and they went and got Michal, took her away from her husband Palti to bring her back. So they went and got her, took her from Palti, and as they're traveling back, Palti is following behind them, weeping and crying. And then Abner told him, go home. And then he turned around and he went home. Okay, so now things are moving on. Things are happening. David is going into battle with the Philistines. He's conquering them. And then he's trying to transport the Ark of God. And if it's not transported properly and it's touched or certain things happen, people end up dying. So the Ark of God was falling over. It had gone over, I think, a little bump or something, hit a rock. And somebody put their hand out to steady the Ark of God and touched it. He died. But then David found a way to transport it where people weren't dying. He was able to bring it where he wanted it to go. He was happy that he was successful in this. And he was so happy that he started to leap and dance and praise the Lord. He's like dancing before the Lord. He's celebrating his success. And, you know, he's wearing his garments and they're starting to fall around. But he's doing his thing. He's like dancing before the Lord, leaping and jumping. And like, as I mentioned, clothes are falling off, but he's not naked. Pretty sure that's not the case. But Michal was watching from a window. She's looking out the window, sees him dancing, and she was filled with contempt, and she despised him in her heart because he wasn't acting kingly. He's, you know, doing whatever. And when David comes in, Michal greets him with disgust. She's calling him out like,
what are you doing dancing around and exposing yourself and your clothes are falling off and you're out here all wild and unseemly.
And he snaps back and he tells her, you know, God chose me over your father, my whole family, and he anointed me and he gave me victory. He gave me success. So yeah, I'm going to praise the Lord. And he's like, and I'll do even more than that. I'll get loose if I want to.
What you gonna do about it? You don't need to say anything. Don't try to check me. Okay.
And because of Michal's response to David, she was childless for her entire life. That was her punishment. So that's the situation with Michal. That's why in that list she didn't have any sons, because she didn't have any kids. And now David, his men are off fighting in a battle. And this is, of course, sometime later. They're all fighting in a battle. David is home resting. I don't know why he was home, but he was chilling at home. He decides to take a little stroll on the roof of his palace. And while he's up there, he sees a woman bathing. And she's beautiful to him. And he asked, "Who is this woman?" And he sent somebody to go find out who she was. And they brought word back. This woman is Bathsheba. She is the daughter of Eliam. And she is the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Now Uriah fought in David's army. So he was one of David's men. Under David's leadership, he fought under him. He finds out Uriah the Hittite is her husband. David sends for her. He's like, "Bring her to my palace." And when she was brought to the palace, he slept with her. She went home, and then she sent word back to David that she was pregnant. Of course. So now David is like, what am I going to do? This is this man's wife. What he does is he sends for Uriah. Bring him to the palace. Bring him here. When he gets there, David tries to get Uriah to go home and sleep with his wife. He's like, I need you to think that's your child, because whatever. So he tries to get Uriah to go home and sleep with his wife. Uriah leaves. He doesn't go home. He ends up sleeping at the palace entrance with the palace guard. The palace guard sleeps there. He just like laid down somewhere and just slept there at the palace entrance. When David found out that Uriah slept there instead of going home, he called him back. He questioned him like, why didn't you go home? And Uriah was a very loyal man. He said, well, the men that I fight with, my men are out there living in tents, sleeping in open fields. How am I okay to go home and have the pleasures of marriage while they're living like that? It wouldn't be right. And he said he wasn't going to do it. So then David is like, oh, just stay here then, stay here. So about 2 nights, Uriah stayed in the palace with David. And then while he was there, David got him drunk and then sent him home, hoping that him being drunk, he would just go home. But no, he went back to the palace entrance and slept there again. And so David's plan didn't work. So the next thing he needed to do was set Uriah up to be killed in battle. So he sent message for Uriah to be placed at the hottest part of the battle. And that's what they did. And he actually sent the message for Uriah to be placed in a certain spot in a note that he gave to Uriah. But Uriah was so faithful and loyal that he didn't even read the note. He delivered his own DEATH wish to the whoever was in charge. I'm pretty sure it was Joab. But he sent the message for his own destruction, and it actually happened. So Uriah passed away. Bathsheba mourned him, and when the mourning time was over, David sent for her, and she was brought to the palace, and she became one of his wives. And then Bathsheba did give birth to a son, but after a while, the son ends up getting sick. The Lord allowed him to get sick, and then he did pass away. And so that's what happened. And when David was comforting Bathsheba later on, he did sleep with her again, and then she became pregnant, and she had another son, and they named him Solomon. And now we're getting to the last woman that I'm going to be talking about today, and that is another woman named Tamar. Tamar is a very popular name, I think, because there's another Tamar somewhere else. But Tamar is one of David's daughters. As I mentioned, her mother was Maacah, and her full brother was Absalom. Her half-brother was Amnon. Now, Amnon, he was obsessed with Tamar. He was desperately in love with her. He was so in love with her and so obsessed that it made him sick. He was ill from his obsession, and he just wanted her physically. He wanted to be with her. And Tamar was unmarried. She was a virgin. And Amnon's cousin, Jonadab, he had a brilliant idea. He told Amnon, pretend to be sick and then request that Tamar cook for you and feed you the meal to make you feel better. And Amnon had his own house. So David, I guess, was talking to his son, checking on him. Amnon says, you know what would make me feel better? If Tamar cooks my favorite meal and feeds it to me, I'll feel much better. So David says, sure. He asks Tamar to do this. He sends Tamar to Amnon's house to prepare the meal and feed it to him. Tamar came, she mixed the dough in front of Amnon, and then she went off wherever she needed to go to cook it, prepare it. She brought it to him, put it on a tray, set it before him, and he wouldn't eat. He sent his servants out, told his servants, go out, and he told Tamar, feed me. I want to eat from your hands. But as she did, he grabbed her and demanded that she go to bed with him. She pleaded like, no, please don't do this. This will bring shame on Israel. Nothing like this has ever done in Israel. You can't do this. Why not talk to the king and just marry me? He wasn't hearing that. He grabbed her, overpowered her, and he assaulted her in an sexual way. His half-sister. And then his love turned immediately into hate. He hated her at this point. And he hated her more than he had loved her before. So his hate was multiplied. He wanted her gone. He told her to get out. She begged and said, no, please don't do this. This is worse. Sending me away is worse than what you just did. So she didn't want to be sent away because it's almost like, well, you did this now. You kind of have to just go through with it. Marry the marriage or whatever and let me stay. He hated her. He called the servants back in and he said, get her out. Throw this woman out and lock the door behind her. Tamar wore a beautiful robe, which was customary for the virgin daughters of kings to wear. So she tore her robe and she put ashes on her face and she went away crying. And Absalom, her other brother, her full brother, saw her, and Absalom asked her if Abner had been with her. So she must have told Absalom what happened, and Absalom hated Amnon after that. David heard about what happened. He was very upset. But Absalom did not speak to Amnon about the situation, and he just had a hate for him. David was displeased, but that was still his son. There's no mention of David mistreating Amnon in any way. Things kind of went on from there. And then Tamar ended up living like a desolate woman in Absalom's house from there on. But 2 years later, Absalom planned a party and he had Amnon killed in revenge. So he had been planning it for those whole 2 years, planned the party, had the party, set him up, had him taken down, and that was his revenge for Tamar. And that's where we end with part 7. So lots of crazy things happen with the women. I'm like, to be a woman back then. But we're getting through it. Part 8 is coming up. And then the last part, I think, will be part 9. I think it's just going to be 2 more parts for the Old Testament. I'm not exactly sure, but it's looking like that. Because it looks like the next women coming up are kind of like minor characters. And it might be very condensed. And then Esther, I'm going to leave her for last. Part 8 and 9 will be on their way. So I thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. And again, I hope you're enjoying it. If you are, hit the like button, hit the thumbs up down below. It really helps me out. And I'll see you in the next one.